Welcome back, Spencer and Sasha. Hee or whatever I'm gonna do. I ain't much decided what a catchphrase would be on here, but anyhow, are you hiding? Here, get your table. Little baby. Anyway, I was talking about the story that came from the video I did earlier, and basically, okay, here's the deal. Drugs will get you put in prison. This is not advocating it. This is showing long-term permanent damage that was done to the person in the story that I'm talking about. So although some events are a little bit comical, it all leads and ends up in prison. So there's definitely no glorification of this, and I'll be very stern when I say that here, just as I do on the other channel. But anyhow, so at 16, I was driving for this guy to pick dope up to and from, because I'd get a year whatever and he'd get decades, and as messed up as that is, it's true. But I thought I was one of the dudes. They didn't care about me. What was a bunch of 30-year-olds hanging out with a 16-year-old? It'd be like I hung out with a 16-year-old. There's some cool kids and stuff, but I mean, like hanging out, you know what I mean? I can't relate really to like a child, you know what I mean? I'm grown. But anyhow, so every night the party ramped up. It was 24-hour partying, but at night it ramped up. Okay, so he was making so much money because he was the main, like I'd say 85 to 90% of the city's heroin came from this one person, and he was getting it for so cheap, and he was selling it all the way up expensive. Literally, he was making, it had to have been, he's making probably 25, 30,000 a week profit. Now, out of that 25, 30,000 a week profit, the majority of that got used up in drugs. He had 4 or 5 cars. God, he had a lot of jewelry, a lot of cool knickknacks, but a lot of it majority went up in drugs. So on top, he averaged, because I counted, and I'd also go scrape up his leftovers, because he wasn't shooting up back then. He ended up getting to that point. Back then, he just sniffed a whole lot. Talking about, this is not low quality either. It's just he had an unlimited supply, so he was able to get a tolerance. That's something people fail to understand. When you have an unlimited supply, you have the ability to go to higher rates of addiction. The most addicted person I ever saw, was doing, on average, I would say 35 to 50 bags a day that were good. He was 120, 130 pounds, 6 foot tall, and I watched somebody that was 220 and had a tolerance fall out 2 bags of the same exact dope. So this is not the same guy. This guy was probably about, 180 pounds, 6'2". And he was snorting probably in the area of 25 to 40 a day. He'd wake up in the morning and he'd pull a few out. He'd always have some on him. And he'd rip them right down the middle, pour it out on the table, take his hand, do that, and snip it up. Yeah, there was a lot left on the table afterwards. I'd go clean up, let's say. And every night though came the coke. That's when the coke came out. So every night this guy who went by Sparks, who had an Escalade with 24s on it, that actually ended up getting talked into trying his own product by this guy's brother and lost everything because he got addicted. That's a whole other story though. Oh Lord. But he come by every night. Now back then it was different than it is today. Back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was a lot cheaper than it is today. And back then, I would say it was $32.50 for 4.5, and then a quarter brick was $62.50 back then. And it was, for me personally, it was $24,000 for a whole one, but I didn't want to have that much weight, so I usually stuck with getting the quarter bricks, and I cut it up too. But anyway, at this time I was dealing with something. Anyway, he'd get an ounce every night for $850. He'd spend $850 and he would get an ounce every single night of raw. There was a process done with this that was done something different than I have typically seen. See, when people cook crack, they're adding baking soda and they're causing a chemical reaction. There's another way that people do it that they did it, and I'd never seen that before, and it was freebase. So they had ammonia, and they would drop a full ounce of coke in a cup of ammonia, and they'd start stirring a coat hanger in a circle, dipping it up and down, and it would start sticking to it. No heat whatsoever. I mean, sometimes it had heat, but a lot of times not, no heat. It just basically, instead of adding the baking soda to form a physical chemical reaction, the ammonia was stripping off everything else, and it changed it from a water soluble compound to an oily compound, just as crack is. And it looked like Swiss cheese when they pulled it out. Typically, 28 grams would go in, anywhere between 19 to 23 grams would come back out, because everything was being shred off of it that was impure. And of course, there's some I'm sure that's lost, but basically, this is like 95% pure. And it was, I end up doing it. It would hit you, and I instantly threw up the first time I did it. It was something else. Lucky I did not die of a heart attack, if we're being completely honest. But anyway, every night for his little entourage, the mother, his children, his brother, his stepbrother, me, and there's usually a couple other people. Okay. And of course he'd get the most, but like there'd be a certain amount, he'd probably take about, I want to say he'd probably have like 7 to 10 grams for himself, then pass the rest out for everybody else. He'd make sure he had enough to where he did all he wanted to do. So one night, the mother of his children stuffs a lot in the end of a pipe. She stuffs that much in. It's so much she can't get air through it to actually get high on it. So they took a safety pin and poked a hole through it so then air could pass through it. This is 95 plus percent pure. It's higher than raw crack. Okay, this is like the highest purity that you're gonna get of this, and she's put a tremendous amount in there. She hits it and it sizzles for 20-30 seconds straight, and her eyes cross, and she falls on the ground and she has a seizure. She's lucky she did not die. When she got back up, one eye looked straight, the other went up to 2:45. So one look at it, she got 2:45 eye, and it went back to normal. But every time she would get high on heroin, her eye would keep going to 2:45. She'd get this lazy eye every time that she'd get, a good buzz going on heroin. And what ultimately ended up happening one night as we're sitting there, this is the funny but awful story that's led to this point, is I'm sitting there, and she's, on her knees nodding out, like not even able to talk. She's so fucked up. Got that one eye going to 2:45. Well, the guy who I was the driver for, him and her were together. Okay, he looks at me. He looks at her. Looks at me. Looks at her again. That fucking eye is getting to me, man. And I'm trying not to laugh, and and I'm just gonna call her Candy. Not gonna say her real name. He looks at you. Candy, what the fuck is wrong with your goddamn eye? And I'm like, oh shit, what's getting ready to happen here? And he walks over, and he's a little stumbly, fucked up too. And she's on her knee, she's so fucked up she can't even talk. He gets her chin, and he puts it in his hand, and he goes. I'm like, oh shit, this motherfucker's trying to knock her, he trying to bop her eye back into place. And I was like, that's the type bizarre shit we'd have go on. Now, ultimately, just to let you know, I've looked on, Facebook to see this girl, and she was beautiful back then. She's busted now. Oh gosh, she's busted. She looks like she's 60, and back then she looked younger than she was. It's really gotten to her bad, and she's got that eye's permanently going. So, just think about that before you get high on that shit. Next time, you might get you a 2:45 eye, and that shit be stuck that way. And somebody else, I'm going to tell you a quick story about somebody else that I was friends with. He died. He passed away, overdosed. Very sad. He's a stand-up comic, actually, there at the end, but he took me across the mountain. He's like, "You're not going to believe this shit. You're not ready for this." And, it was during the same time I was driving for this guy. So you got to think, I'm 16 hanging out with these 30-year-olds. This 30-year-olds take me to this place, tell me I'm not going to believe this shit I'm getting ready to see. And I'm thinking, what could it be? It couldn't be, as immature as it actually was. So we drive to this place, and it overlooks a mental hospital that is over the mountain. And it was close to the house that we would drive to at night where cops and robbers didn't know where it was, the one in Newcastle I spoke on. It's near that. So it's a mental hospital. It's a lockdown mental hospital, but they have a tennis court. And he's like, "Wait for it, dude, wait for it." And out walk the people from the mental hospital and the people that are working with them. I guess this is like their recreation. And they would drop a ball for one of these people that's like Thorazined out, and the ball would hit the ground, and they'd swing 5 seconds later after it was just bounce on the ground. Then they drop another ball, and they just kept missing. And he's sitting there with his bowl, lighting it up, going, I'm like, man, you took me over here so you could smoke pot and laugh at the people from the mental hospital because they're too doped up to hit a tennis ball. He just laughed. He just sitting there laughing. I was like, oh my God, y'all are some dumb sons of bitches. I swear, I was probably one of the most mature people out of the bunch. I was the one person that if people got messed up, you could count on me making sure they didn't get robbed. Okay, I did get messed up, but I like to be in control. I never nodded out. I was the person who made sure that nobody ran their pockets or stole their shit. Okay, basically, I talked about him being the biggest dealer and kingpin. Basically, I ran the biggest operation in the city, only I did not get the benefits of it, okay, because I was just a runner. He got the benefits of being the kingpin, but like whenever I moved in, the longer and longer I was there, he got so fucked up to where he just wouldn't do a motherfucking thing at all. And I'd be doing everything, taking the phone call. We had multiple different phones for different reasons. Picking up the phones, running across the street, running it back, while he's just nodded out there at the end. It got that fucked up. Yeah, it was messed up, man. Plenty of stories about it. I'll get some more about him, but him trying to bop her eye back into place and looking at me saying, "Fucking eye is getting to me, man." Oh, Lord have mercy. It's wild times. Wild times. Shit, I don't know how so many of us, it's like all of us made it through that time. But out of the people that were in that time around, better than half of them are dead now. They've overdosed. They're gone. But back then, there wasn't fentanyl. It was just heroin, raw heroin. Sometimes it's pre-bagged up. Sometimes I go down there and I pick it up. Back then it was more expensive though. Back then, if he sent me to get it, I had to get a quarter kilo for $25,000. I had to pay $45 for a half of one. He never got more than that. I believe a whole one been about $80,000. And typically, cut would have put on that depending on how much money he had. If he was trying to stretch it, sometimes it'd be you put 2 on it. So basically, if it's a quarter kilo, you put a half kilo cut. So that'd make it down. Assuming it's like 90%, that'd put it down to probably about 25-30%. And then if you cut it in half, you probably put it down to about 40-45%. Because it was about pure, about close to it. When I picked that up, it all depended on the person. They're different people. But like I said, I was a kid and doing this, and Lord have mercy. It is. I just look back at this and I'm like, thank God my life has changed. Thank God I don't deal with that dumbass shit anymore. And the people, when I see the people out and they're high, it's so annoying. It's so fucking annoying to see how people ramble about and and always ask you for some shit and try to lie, try to run fucking game on me for shit, then you can make a car payment. Somebody grandma's in the hospital, and I'm like, you're drooling on yourself, and You look like you're one head injury away from eating your own shit off the ground, and you're going to try to convince me that, you're just so unfortunate with life while you're obviously fucked up, okay? As if I, of all people, wouldn't fucking know. Oh, it annoys me. I cannot stand to be around a fucking junkie because it reminds me, how close to this person did I look like for the longest amount of time? That's a concept that will fuck you up worse than polio when you really think about it. You get annoyed because you see a possible reflection of what you used to look like. So that's an ending thought to close on. So anyway, if you liked it, press the like button. If not, fuck you. I hope you did though.